start with this panel. It is very simple and black because I figured I'd go on to the blackness of death that we're all encompassing as we start aging.
Hi, David.
He told me I was going to die at 40 if I didn't exercise, so I freaked out for 5 years.
This is what happens when you have a nihilist for a friend, and you've learned this quick.
So, how to make you feel old? Anime has had a very interesting journey in the United States. If you've seen Speed Racer, Gigantor, Astro Boy, all of those came out to America in the 60s, and well, 60s, 70s, and most people didn't think of them as really anime because we didn't know what it was. And so most people didn't even think about it. And then when you get into the 80s and you have Voltron. And also, if you think about it, Thundercats, Transformers, even though they're American cartoons, they're kind of Japanese because a lot of the designs are based on either...
And Toei animated some of them.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then even the opening for X-Men is, the cartoon is a Japanese anime opening. So when we get into like the late 80s and early 90s, we get a lot of transformation of anime coming over to America. Like,
And also at this time too, a lot of clubs were starting to spring up because they would have friends in Japan who would send over VHS tapes to their family and friends with subtitles they put in themselves from just random stuff they record off TV, whether it be tokusatsu or anime.
And then, so you start to feel old when you think about all the anime that you got or you saw back in the day, because it was either really low quality, bootleg. Since we lived in Buffalo, we were a hop, skip, and a jump from Canada, and Chinatown in Canada had the great... In Toronto had the great bootleg museum where you could buy almost any kind of anime. It was like a nerd's paradise. You just had to be aware that characters' names were not going to be characters' names. I think all of the Inuyasha characters went by the Yu-Gi-Oh names. It was great. I was like, Kagome.
It was only in 2 episodes.
It felt like 50. But then, early anime releases. This is an example of what we got from our anime.
If anybody remembers the old Streamline dub of this.
Oh yeah. That's the other problem with early anime releases, is if you did get it dubbed, you either had like 3 voice actors doing 75 different parts, some of the female voices being done by men.
Or in some cases, the direction is way the hell off.
Absolutely.
Voltron.
And
Warriors of the Wind.
Oh my god.
They look great. So before I show you some examples, actually let me show you an example of one of the earliest releases of Record of Lotus War.
And this is one of the few times I will say the dub is actually held up.
So this is so this is just the OVA. So you see we have 6 VHS tapes for an OVA.
For 13 episodes on 6 VHSs.
So for those of you who don't know, VHS is this giant black box
Please do not pull out the tape.
that has these spinning thingies in it.
I know what
You put it in a machine and somehow the spinning thingies spin and it displays the image on you.
I'm sure we still have a few VHSs.
And most of these, I don't know how much you paid for these. This is his, by the way, because he generously lent it to me. But most VHS tapes, you got the opportunity to pay $50 for either sub or dub. And most VHS tapes back in the day, the most they could hold memory or data-wise was about 2 hours. I remember when I wanted to watch Gone with the Wind, which is a 3-hour movie, you had 2 VHS tapes, you had to watch the first one, and then hope to God whoever watched it before rewound it.
That was the same thing my mom has with her friggin' Braveheart VHS.
Well, yeah, Braveheart, Titanic, any long movie, went into multiple copies. Then, just for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to show you a nice little example. This is Record of Lotus War Blu-ray. This also has not only the OVA, but also the series.
What's wrapped?
There's a reason I.
So big sets, small little packaging now.
I will say though, the one cool thing that they could do with VHS was have like a spine that would line up to have a cover. Like one thing I did love with the Dragon Ball releases was there'd be some big battle sequence with all the tapes when you lined them up. Like
They
the
were
Frieza
so
saga, and they
cool.
change if you bought the uncut ones or the edited versions.
And also around this time with the VHS releases, if you wanted the subtitled version, you were forking out $10 or more just for the sub copy over the dub copy.
Yes, 2 episodes of tape for Evangelion.
So once upon a time, back in the far, far days of the 90s and early 2000s, you had to, like I said before, you had to choose between sub or dub. If you were a purist, or if you wanted to watch it in English for simplicity's sake. And then we learned as we got older, as I said in a panel yesterday, youngins are lucky. They get quality dubs now. You can actually listen to them like, they actually are trying.
It's weird seeing that transition. I was in a weird period where I saw sort of that weird transition between the two as...
Oh, you got a weird transition. I lived it.
Yeah, you were living that.
That's my war story.
Anthony, you were 15 when it started, that transition.
So-
Let's think about this.
Wait, I was 15.
I think part of
Yeah.
that was because a lot of the new actors grew up watching
Yes.
this stuff.
Yeah.
They're like, we can do better.
Absolutely. No,
Yeah.
and I don't knock on the original voice actors because
They were good voice actors, it's just they didn't have good direction.
Yeah, the
I mean-
scripts and the direction weren't that great. One thing I do love about this time when some of the... Because I was in an anime club at the time with the VHS stuff. We were getting over fan dubs of Dirty Pair and stuff.
Oh,
well, and so
jeez.
like I mentioned about VHS tapes, so usually 1 to 2 hours of content, which could be, if you had a series, 3 to 4 episodes. Not that DVDs were much better.
Oh,
Jesus.
Viz.
So I love this series. If you've never heard of it, it's a little known series called Trouble Chocolate. It is basically really, really, really silly. But when I bought this originally, and I sold it stupidly, and I bought it from somebody else for $10, but 4 episodes.
$40.
4 episodes.
$40.
Basically, this is $200.
Hey, that's an improvement over VHS stuff.
This for 26 episodes and
13 episodes. 13 and 26.
yeah, that. This cost me $48. $200, $48. It's amazing how much the cost has changed.
Now it's just if you want to buy a figurine, that's where all your
The
money's
other cool
going.
thing is now there's SD Blu-ray that Discotek releases where they'll put a whole 50, 60 episode series on one set with its 1 to 2 discs.
Yes. Oh, Fist of the
Well-
North Star's standard def Blu-ray released by Discotek.
I wanna kill them.
152 episodes on just 2 standard def Blu-rays.
Put your mask on.
By the way,
No, I'm kidding.
Sentai is doing the same thing with
Yes.
their old ADV releases.
They are.
I actually just bought their release of the original Kino's Journey in standard definition Blu-ray too.
So one of the other challenges with aging in anime is we had very limited options of buying anime. We didn't have, the internet existed. I will say that. The internet has been around since the 70s, but it wasn't for public consumption until about 96. But it's not like we had Amazon, Rightstuf, Crunchyroll, all of these places you could buy
Yeah,
it.
Robert's Anime Corner Store and Rightstuf were just catalogs.
Yeah.
Gonna kill you, Sam! The other thing is that TV stations, if they did show anime, it was either extremely edited and it was dubbed. So I watched like Demon City Shinjuku on USA, but I didn't get any of the blood. I didn't get any of the scary stuff. I knew it was horror, but I didn't know what was going on. So also another thing which I will credit Mr. Timothy for is he reminded me that anime was called something else once upon a time.
Please don't.
Give it a moment.
Okay, I'm gonna go buy some on eBay.
Stop your animation. At least it was last time I checked, which was 1987.
And that's true. When I was a kid, I always heard it as Japanimation, which if you think about it is actually incredibly racist. Because it's not like we called any of the series from France or Italy, like Winx Club or...
Rantomation?
Well, yeah, we didn't give them
Weird
some
titles.
sort of title based on their culture. So it was, and the problem is that's all we knew. So when the colloquialism of anime came out, there was a lot of difficulty for some people because technically anime can be anything animated. Because you have Ed, Ed, and Eddie, you have Adventure Time, which I still think you need to have drugs for.
Oh, you don't?
Which
no,
one?
you have to have drugs for it. But
Which one?
Adventure Time.
Not Ed and Eddie?
No, because that's an allegory for purgatory.
We're believing that theory today.
No, I watched it, so it is. But
I did too, but that's a different story.
everybody's different. But so anime was a weird thing when we were living it back in the day. Same thing. It was super expensive. I've always loved this meme because back in the early 2000s, when I started going to anime conventions, people would have messenger bags or t-shirts saying anime, drugs would be cheaper. And all I'm thinking with it in my colored past is, do you even really know? And the answer is
that really is.
exactly. And technically, I will say from past experience, yes, drugs are cheaper, but anime is much safer.
Also, one's going to
Depends who you
last
ask.
longer than the other.
Now, so I like to talk about how poor I am. This, sadly, this is not an actual picture of what I owned, like of my own collection, but somebody had it, so it made me feel happy. This was the first VHS tape I ever bought. It was the OVA of Master Moskitan. How many people have actually heard of this series? That makes sense because the OVA was the only thing ever released in America, and even when I tried to find...
And it was never finished.
It was never finished. I never could find the actual television series
Nobody has
in
ever
America.
fan subbed it either.
Jesus.
And this, when I went to Media Play, there were two copies, one in English, one in Japanese. And I had to choose for 45 minutes which language I wanted. And since this was the first anime thing I ever bought, I didn't know if I was going to like Japanese dubs. I felt very awkward about it. So I bought the English version, and I watched this VHS tape because I loved it so much. I was so mad when the rest never came to America. I watched this about 75 times. So I got my money's worth, but I felt broke. I'm like, why am I doing this to myself? And then the greatest thing happened with the internet. LimeWire, Napster. Oh, how I love these.
Who remembers giving their computer AIDS with LimeWire?
Who remembers AOL? Oh my god. I cried every time AOL disconnected from my phone.
Who remembers going into IRC chat rooms to get the torrent links
Yeah,
because they weren't
so-
public?
When she, before we actually met, she gave my mom these Dragon Ball CDs that had fan subs for the cell.
I paid $100 for this, by the way.
And she couldn't play it on anything she had, so she gave it to me, and it was everything from the Cell Saga through the rest of the series with random episodes of GT and a few random episodes before the Cell Saga. So I'd go to a friend's house and we'd watch in the tiniest screen because the video quality was so garbage that you could only read the subtitles if it was like an itty bitty box. And we just like, oh my god, this is Dragon Ball that hasn't been brought to America yet. We're going to watch this. I think that's a guy in the background there. I can't tell, but the subtitles, the subtitles are a little bit squiggly, but we can read them.
So when pirating came out, I'm not going to condone pirating. I I won't say my personal opinion on it because I do bad things, but I tend to buy legit more so than anything else. But back in the late 90s, early 2000s, before anime really was popularized in the United States, that was the only way you could watch anime if you wanted to watch a series. You had to pirate off the internet, which I will say, downloading one episode of anime in those days with AOL took 3 days, as long as people were seating. One episode! And then it was a nightmare.
Well, and then my very first fan sub series was Sailor Stars.
That checks out.
Since it was like, oh, well, they're not bringing this to America? Okay, I'll go with this one.
Kind of just reminds me how being a magical girl fan in the 2000s was pain.
Oh,
So-
2000s. Try the 90s.
Yeah.
So I have to give credit to Disney. Disney, well, they own everything, so they are overlords. But Disney did a very smart thing. They made a partnership a long time ago with Studio Ghibli. Due to that, we were able to get a lot of animated movies like Princess Mononoke, Spirited Away, Howl's Moving Castle, so many great films.
And we even they went into the back catalog and we actually got Nausicaa uncut for the first time.
And Porco Rosso, and so many other great films. And it was due to Disney doing this that helped to popularize it. Yes, we had Genya, or Pioneer at the time. We had Funimation in its early days.
ADV was pretty much at its heyday at this point.
Exactly. So we had a lot of studios that were doing anime, but they were all under the radar. They were all low tech. They weren't popular. They weren't what people knew. They weren't mainstream.
The biggest mainstream hit was with Bandai with Cowboy Bebop at the time.
Exactly, but a lot of people didn't have it. So due to that fact, it wasn't until Disney kind of gave their own seal of approval that made it okay.
And Toonami.
Well, okay, Toonami came just after Disney's partnership started with Ghibli. But yes, Toonami was the next thing that helped with it. And then anime goes mainstream. Toonami blows up. You have Dragon Ball airing on there constantly.
Gundam Wing.
You have Gundam Wing, which was uncensored. It was
Tenchi Muyo and Outlaw Star.
It was one of the worst Gundam series in my opinion, but I've seen so much more, so I love like G Gundam and things like that. But
and then we got the later seasons of Sailor Moon air on TV
Hey,
for the first
growing
time.
up and watching Gundam Wing, it was like the coolest thing ever on TV.
But this, I don't know what anime this is from, but this line here, I love it. Kids these days run their mouths like they're hot shit. Kids these days think that they're like, oh yeah, we don't need to care about finding ways to watch anime. It's everywhere, and it's like, yeah, bastards.
And right around this time,
Today, no anime.
Crunchyroll had been founded as a pirated streaming site. They got exposure and decided to go legit. A few years later, what happens? They get probably the biggest breakout that we have seen, and it happens to be one of the most popular isekai of all time with Sword Art Online.
But who remembers when Crunchyroll was just like Kiss Anime?
That's actually how I watched my Go-On during Geki Ranger episodes.
Absolutely. They were the place to go to watch pirated anime. And when they went legit, one, it was like, wow, you can do that? You can go legit? But at the same time, it was a challenge because for all the people that relied on it, who didn't want to use all of their bandwidth to download, you were like, okay, what are we going to do now to watch a lot of our stuff? So you actually saw, when Crunchyroll went legit, an uptick in pirating because people were unsure if they were going to continue being able to watch what they wanted. And then we also had other companies get in on the anime pipeline. We had Stars. We had, obviously, you had Cartoon Network with Warner Brothers.
And somebody reminded me on Twitter last night. Who remembers Neon Alley where they're opening up an old Viz DVD?
Oh man, that's right.
But you also had Netflix.
Sci-Fi Channel back in the.
Back when they actually spelled the
And
correct.
then,
Yeah,
the,
my,
and then the
like,
Action Network used to
Even
also
though I
play.
watched Robotech and Voltron as a kid, for me, my introduction to anime was when Sci-Fi Channel did a week of anime in the summer of '98 with Apollo Smile, the anime girl. It was like some cosplayer, and they showed Galaxy Express 3-9, Fatal Fury the motion picture,
Armitage.
Armitage the Third, and like two. I think the other Galaxy Express movie, and one other.
It was the God Mars movie.
And I was like, Fatal Fury was like, this is really cool. Went out, bought the VHS tape, and at the store, there was a store called Babbage's, which became GameStop. And the guy's like, why do you want to buy a dub? Don't you want the subtitle one? It's better. Like, I'll go with the dub.
Well,
And after that, I was hooked. I would go to Blockbuster Video Factory and rent all these VHS tapes.
so I loved it when anime became more accessible because I could then find ways to see it without having to like do what I really didn't want to spend all my time doing, which was downloading. So it was great, and it was a nice opportunity to also see series that I never knew existed. It was through things becoming more mainstream that helped me to access like Fruits Basket. I never knew what Fruits Basket was, and it's now one of my favorite series. And
That was also the first series that Funimation put out in like 4 volumes, I think.
yes, 4 volumes, 6 episodes, 6 or 7 depending on the
Because usually DVDs were like 4 episodes, and that was the first time they're like, oh, well, this isn't going to sell well. Let's put it out in 4 volumes and hope for the best, and it was a huge seller for them.
And then that's where Funimation, shortly after that, started seeing the smaller and smaller sets with more episodes started to come out.
And then ADV, they're like, oh, we're going to get rid of the 8-volume box sets. And then so they started that with Noir and Rossifon, and suddenly, we decided it's going to be 7-volume box sets from now on.
And then 6 volumes, and then ADV goes under.
Ouch.
So I will say what really did save the anime industry in America is the one series that gatekeepers hate when people say they like, or non-big anime fans say they like, and then bougie anime fans who are cultured say, oh, you watched that show, it is so old. And that's Dragon Ball Z. Dragon Ball Z is what really helped put anime on the map and help it also become a little bit more mainstream after Disney made their push with Studio Ghibli, because Funimation had a gold mine. And that's why you see so many versions of that same series. And then we get more streaming sites. Everybody has a streaming site now. You get a streaming site. You get a streaming site. So when Netflix went digital, when they stopped doing solely disc-based, they put so many animes on their website. You also had Crunchyroll going legit. You had Funimation starting to do their own thing.
You had the Anime Network trying to stay afloat and keep ADV afloat.
Exactly. You had the Anime Network. You had so many streaming sites, and we're getting more and more each week. Because it feels like currently there's like 30 streaming sites you can go to watch anime legally.
And one thing we're seeing right now, going back to Disney, they no longer have the Ghibli license since that's now part of Shout Factory, but Disney is now getting into the licensing business. Summertime Rendering, which was one of the best series last year, was locked on a Disney license until they shuffled it onto Hulu.
New Bleach series has been licensed by Disney.
And what Disney's doing is like, they're licensing these shows, keeping them on Disney Plus outside of the US, but using Hulu as their distribution platform here in the US.
But that's the other thing I was going to mention. All of the big companies out there, such as Disney, Warner Brother, well, Verizon, or whomever owns them now.
Discovery.
And then Comcast is doing the same thing with Universal, Paramount. They all now are working with either Japanese companies or doing it themselves. They're making their own anime.
Or they're just the highest bidder that Sony and Aniplex can't get enough money to bid on now.
Exactly. So everybody is getting into the game, and more people are going to streaming because a lot of people, well, I am not one of these people because I live with him, but a lot of people
I like my over 2,000 Blu-rays.
I agree.
But
Nothing beats physical.
I swear, you're both interrupting cows.
Welcome to
I know, I feel your pain. But
Moo.
But with so much streaming out there, you really don't have to buy anime anymore if you didn't want to actually buy it. All you have to do is buy a subscription. And I think this is the one thing I'm incredibly jealous of, that there was no way we could have had it back in the day. But I am so jealous about the fact that we didn't have streaming, because it would have saved me hundreds upon hundreds of dollars.
Yeah, nowadays you can stream a series like, okay, I liked it, but I'm not going to go out of my way to actually buy it.
Yeah, close to. So, this is going to be the slide I love to talk about. Who has seen this movie, Dazed and Confused? So Matthew McConaughey has the greatest line in the world. That's what I love about this California weather. They get colder and we stay the same temperature, or they keep on getting younger. I stay the same age and they keep on getting younger. The challenge with watching anime is because while it's not for kids necessarily, it is for adults. But many of the characters or protagonists or anyone in the series that you end up watching are usually younger individuals.
Or if there's a mentor figure and he's a pervert, he'd be canceled in our modern culture.
Oh, I have another slide for that one. But so as we're watching a lot of series, the one challenge that I'm always coming up with now is I still love those series. I'm still going to watch series like Black Clover or Handeru Dango or anything like that that do have characters that are in teenage
Almost
years.
all the slice of life we watch has characters in their teenage years.
Yeah, so I enjoy it. But there is at the same time, as you get older, you're wanting series that kind of connect with you. Which I was so happy when like Tiger and Bunny came out. Because all of the characters, really except for two people in the show, were in their 20s and 30s.
Why do you think we like playing the Yakuza series?
Exactly. So I enjoy now, I still enjoy what I enjoy, but that's the one challenge as you get older. Like, one of the questions that I've had conversations with others about is it creepy to watch shows with teenagers when you're like now 20, 30 years older than those characters? And truthfully, it isn't the eye of the beholder. If we're like creepily slathering and like, oh my god, then maybe it's a little weird. But at the same time, I don't judge anybody for what they like. But that is the hard part about aging with anime, because they're not aging and we are. It's the hard part about even like The Simpsons. Bart Simpson has been 10 years old for what, nearly 40 years?
The South Park kids are still in 4th grade.
34.
So that's one of the cool things I like about anime, is you still get to enjoy what you like, but at the same time, you have to consciously think about it of like, where do you draw a line, do you not draw a line? Like, what do you all think? I would love to have your opinion.
I've had this discussion with my friends too, because I was like, I like these things, but I'm like My Hero Academia. I'm like,
Absolutely.
I relate to the teachers more now. So like, at this point in age, I'm like, Deku literally could be my son.
Yes!
And so it's weird because I'm like, when I first got into anime, I was like, most of the characters I was watching, like, they were adults. Cowboy Bebop had adults. I watched El Hazard, Record of Lodoss War, one of the first animes I bought. Everybody was at least older teenagers or younger adults, and now I'm just like, can I go have a beer with this person? Can they actually do anything because they're, not in high school? And it's weird because I'm like, where can I find things that are older? Because I'm like, I feel like I'm aging out, and I don't want to age out. I love anime, but
well, and that's why I still watch those, but I do feel the same conflict at the same time as I get older, because I'm like, do I relate to the characters anymore? And that's the one thing I love about Gundam. Gundam, that franchise is ageless. Even if some of the characters like Amuro Ray starts out as a teenager, Camille starts out as a teenager before it becomes a vegetable. But
the themes in there keep it where it's like you
Yeah.
can still enjoy it.
any other thoughts? And that's why I wanted to do this panel. It's not just me spouting out things, but like just dialogue. Yes.
Well, what is your view on like censorship/localization in America?
So, censorship or localization?
Yes.
So, one, I don't like censorship in any degree. I think censorship, if you have to censor something in America or anywhere, let's say even Australia, because Australia has very strict censorship laws.
There are series that a lot of people, and we're going to be doing a podcast episode on this coming up, so I don't want to spoil too much on this, but some of the localization stuff that people complain about, well, it's America, it's like, no, the corporations are actually corresponding to some of their other markets because they have to cater to Australian law, New Zealand law, some of the European laws with some of the stuff they're bringing over now.
I personally am against censorship. My belief is if you don't like it, like if you feel like you're going to be offended, just don't watch it. Don't ruin it for everyone else that is going to enjoy it, because you personally aren't going to enjoy it.
But I also think there's a level of responsibility as well that has to go on somewhat to the consumer's shoulders. Like, okay, for anyone who's a parent, I don't have kids myself, but I have nephews and a niece, and they like anime. And my sister and her husband know nothing about anime. So I try to be that responsible adult of like, okay, no, that's probably not going to be appropriate for them right now. But I would say you have to give some responsibility to the consumer of, well, first you have to at least give the consumer enough information to know. You can't say, here is Gantz. Gantz is about warriors. Okay, that tells me nothing. It's horrific. It is violent. At least give people a hint. That's why I like when America instituted like TV-14, where they gave like a little bit more insight into it. Like TV-14, language, violence, sexual content. It's like, fine. That at least gives people a clue of what they're getting into. As for localization, a good example of where there was a big controversy is in Spirited Away. So if you saw Spirited Away, kind of like early on in the movie, Sen goes into this coal factory. And when he was clapping his hands, the coalman, I can't remember his name, they had to localize that whole thing because it's a very traditional Japanese thing that they were doing, but there was no way to translate it into English that made any sense. Basically, it would be almost like a text-to-speech type of transition. So sometimes localization is a necessary evil.
And it does become a necessary evil too in the respect of lip flapping because Western animation standards is that the lip flaps and the words have to match 100%. So sometimes lines have to be cut for what was translated, sometimes they have to be extended, or words have to be changed to a synonym that means the same thing, so everything has the same amount of lip flapping motion and get the exact same point across.
So sometimes you have to do it. You have no other choice. Yes. Oh, go. Oh.
Another thing I think a lot of people don't realize is many localization changes come at the direct request of the original animation studio and writer.
Yep.
So, I forget which director it was for EDR. He said, he made a pretty quote at a convention several years ago. He said, his job when they're subtitling anime is to make sure it is an exact translation to tell you, to explain to you what is being said in the dialogue. When it comes to dubbing it in English, they have to dub it to make sense for the American audience, but it needs to still retain the same emotions. So if it's a line that's supposed to be funny, even if they change the dialogue around, as even one of the anime directors of a series said, if the audience is still laughing, they got the point.
It was Mike McFarlane, if I remember right.
No, it was, God, he looks like a grunge punker.
Nice.
He was the one that one day he was complaining. I was like, oh, it sounds like something Capcom would do. And he's like, did you just read my mind?
Was it Taliesin?
Taliesin Jaffe, yes.
That checks out.
Wow, now you're calling out people. Oh, yes, your question.
Well, more a statement, but I think we can all agree with localization. Rice balls into donuts.
Yeah. Or anything with the early Sailor Moon deep dub.
Oh, God.
Well, okay, sometimes it's stupid. It's like we get the point. Like, okay, for example, when they did the 4Kids dub of One Piece, and Sanji's cigarette became a lollipop.
Which then became a joke in Miss Karaitsu in the Monster Development Department. There's a villain that goes into a bar and says, "Can I get a cigarette?" And he pulls it out, and it's a lollipop cigarette that's also a nuclear reactor to power him.
So that's one of the debates that I have had over the years, and it's not stopping me from doing what I'm doing, of watching anime. I'm not going to do that because I'm not being true to myself. But at the same time, I also want to be a responsible person.
One other aspect is yesterday we were interviewing Keith Silverstein. And we were talking about Tomoe and Sailor Moon X. And he said there was one area where Tomoe starts, in the Japanese version, starts singing Twinkle Little Star. Well, they were recording this bit the day after David Bowie died. And so Keith Silverstein decided to sing...
a fake version of Starman.
Yeah, Starman, in the tone of Twinkle Little Star, because he still wanted to be respectful to the original dialogue, but he wanted to do a tribute to David Bowie. So he did that first, and they were like, we like that so much, we're going to keep that in the dub.
But they actually did both takes.
Nice.
They recorded both takes, and Viz decided to go with the original take Silverstein did.
Because even Silverstein says that he likes it when they stick to the original script as close as possible, with just like little things. If they can improve and get the same emotion, he's great with that.
I keep telling everyone, I'm not David Bowie.
So another thing to think about when it comes to anime is that just like when we keep on growing older and the characters stay the same, that a lot of the animes that we watched when we were younger, if we look at them in post-Me Too movement, post-Black Lives Matter, post so many other, like cancel culture or anything like that, and I stand with everyone, so please don't think I don't, but some of the characters we love are so not appropriate. Like, okay, for example, Lupin.
Lupin.
Whatever, it's L-U-P-I-N, I'm gonna go with Lupin.
Lupin.
Whatever.
It's in French pronounced Lupin.
Jesus
Lupin.
Christ!
This
Superstar.
We've been married for 22 years, so he drives me nuts.
Well, you're both wrong. It's Wolf.
That's it. These were for thrown at people, right? That's
No.
sticks.
Okay, but so if you've ever read the original manga for Lupin, or the Wolf, basically, he in the manga and even in some of the early seasons, he's kind of rapey. And you watch it and you're like, and you watch it in that mindset. It's like some of the movies that we've seen from like the 50s, 60s. You're like, you slap a woman, you're like, you don't hit people like that.
City Hunter with Ryo Saiba.
Oh god.
The man is such a pervert. He'll only take cases with women in their early 20s because he thinks he can bet them.
But, and it's not to say, it's kind of like anything with culture. There's always a time and a place for it. Like how old animes, like if you ever watch the old Macross, or any of the old animes where they had African American characters, they look like
A minstrel show.
Well, they had big lips.
Yeah, that's the minstrel show.
Yeah, they looked very, very like what they shouldn't be looking like. And then the reason why a lot of characters back in the day, I know they still do it now because you've mentioned Booba Hime on Friday, or Hime from Bleach.
Oh.
She is going to have terrible back pain, bro.
But
most of the
that's
Bleach
why
is women that aren't this
fan service was huge because, and fan service has changed a lot over the years because people's perception of sex, so to speak, has changed.
Unless you're talking about redo of Healer.
Well, and then like you even had classic series that talked about LGBTQ themes like Utna, El Hazard, because El Hazard is a great series if you want to see how they portray LGBTQ plus.
The Dirty Pair episode.
Dirty Pair was another one that had it.
S.
Well, a lot of Sailor Moon when you had Uranus and Neptune, which is S on.
Zoisite and Quinzite.
Until you got into
Fish's Eye.
Until you got into their adaptations. Oh, we're cousins.
Ah, my God.
Kissing cousins is never a good thing.
I was waiting for someone to.
But so.
What's your hair, man?
Yes, and then they had an issue back. They had a lot of great positive LGBTQ examples with what we just named, but you also had a lot of like negatives, like how they like Ranma 1/2. If you think about it, it's very problematic how they treat men versus women, especially for Ranma when he changes genders. A lot of people find that inappropriate these days because it's a slap in the face for the trans community.
Well, there's also the Cowboy Bebop episodes now taken with Gren have taken slack.
And then you also have there's a negative term in Japan called okama, and what this means is it's a slight against flamboyant men. So, has anybody seen Sorcerer Hunter? If you did not, it's silly ass series. First, the older brother Carrot he's a horn dog to the extreme. His brother Marin, it looks very feminine and very effeminate, and it's always been like, is he not gay or anything like that? Because they always picked on effeminate men. Because in Japan, at least back then, and still to this day now.
Yeah, the only positive reputation I've actually seen of Okama men is in the Yakuza games.
Yes, but generally, that's their way of picking on men for being gay. Because men in Japan are supposed to be strong, male, patriarchal figures, and when you have somebody who's flamboyant, in their perspective, at least for some of the things, even Lupin has a few movies like that, they do a slap in the face of saying, well, if you're not a manly man, you're less than.
Yeah, and I've actually watched the City Hunter episode where he does not realize his client is an Okama man until the very end of the episode. It's probably one of the most canceled episode of the entire series.
Absolutely.
What about One Piece and, well, there's both the Alabaster arc with Mr. Bon Clay and Impelled Down with the prison with the, wow, I'm breaking his memory.
With the drag queen, so to speak?
Oh my
The
God,
Okama Paradise.
Yeah, where Sanji sent.
Well, I'm thinking of while they're in Impelled Down.
Yeah, Impelled Down with the queen.
Yeah, why can't I think of
So.
Oh God,
that whole arc is like an honor to Rocky Horror.
Man, I only read it like 12 years ago. Why can't I
So
think of
in that situation, one of the things that has been making strides more modern is that a lot of things have been a little bit more kind to flamboyant men or gay men in general.
Tiger and Bunny.
And
That is probably one of the most positive representations of a gay black
Fire
man I've ever
Emblem.
seen.
He is one of the best characters in that series.
Well, and they're even taking strides in a lot of their live action portrayals. One of the series that we watch, it's a Kamen Rider series, so Tokusatsu. But back in Wizard, I can't remember the year, they had the first transgender character on screen playing a main character. It was fascinating.
And then 01 had the first time we've actually seen a binary character.
And the new Sentai series has one as a main ranger.
So that's the other challenge when you're aging in anime, is that the heroes that you not necessarily idolized, but you enjoyed, when we look at them, and I can even think of live action counterparts in America, with how we had, like, what was the one 1950s movie noir that we watched where it was an allegory for a gay relationship?
Gilda? Was that the one?
Yeah, it's Gilda. It's a great...
Well, and Double Indemnity does it as well.
Yeah, Double Indemnity really does it.
So, back in the 50s, they did it, and they had to do it so subtly, because if you were open about it...
And this is the time when the Catholic Church ran the MPAA.
Sometimes in the old movies in the 50s, if like two men decide to light up, one of them would take a match to light the other's cigarette. That was their way of implying that type of relationship.
And so when seeing it in anime and Japanese culture, it's always fascinating to see the subtleties and then to see how things have changed. Like when Utena...
That was extremely progressive for its time in 97.
It was incredibly progressive, because you're like, a woman is taking on a princely role and you know she has a relationship with another woman. El Hazard did the same thing.
And then this year, has anybody watched Licorice Recoil yet? So that series has two positive same-sex relationships, and one is an interracial between an American black man and a Japanese man.
Well, you also have Dragon Maid. That is what it's called.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I watched it, but I have a terrible memory of the title. But I love how we're adapting, but at the same time, it's so weird when you rewatch a classic series. Like, I even watched Blue Seed, and I was like, wow, you're not kind to some characters here. So it's fascinating how when you age, you see things in a more modern perspective. The last slide I have here is one that I love. In truth, we're never too old for anime. We should never stop enjoying what we enjoy. I think what we do when we get older is we kind of evolve. And I still have the entire Sailor Moon collection. I have way too many animes. I still have wall scrolls all over the place just because I support anime and I love it so much.
You have a figure collection that's as bad as dirty as mine.
Not anymore. I've actually sold off a lot of it just because I recycled with Leduc and things like that. But growing up and stop watching anime, back in the 90s, that was something that we were always told. Like, you're getting older now, you're in high school, you should stop watching cartoons, or you should stop watching kids stuff. Or when you're in college, you should kind of stop watching kids stuff. Like, when I was in high school, none of my friends knew I liked anime. Oh, God! I might be a girl, so I wouldn't have been beaten up like any of the guys I knew who may have liked anime. But all the guys who I knew who liked anime in school, they were treated like pariahs.
And nowadays, Dragon Ball's like the hip thing at high school.
And it was frustrating as hell because I had to, like, pretend to not like anime. I never bullied anyone. That's one thing I worked very hard not to do. But I kind of had to, like, closet myself in a way, and I'm not trying to use that allegory because it's not fair, but I had to not tell people what I liked personally because of fear of being ostracized. And it wasn't until I started, after I got out of high school and was starting to go into college and I was working at a public library, one of my friends, Miranda, who I was working with, she was a big anime fan as well, or she wanted to be a bigger fan, like I wanted to be a bigger fan, and we just went down the rabbit hole together, and we were both like 19, 20 years old. So and seeing so many younger individuals not be ashamed, I am significantly jealous of that.
Well, like for me, being that I'm a teacher, so I make sure everyone that my students, everyone knows I like anime. And I had one time a third grader who was like, "You like anime? I like anime too." And then she pulled out a Japanese Madoka Magica art book.
And this was before he watched Madoka Magica, but.
And she's like, and then another kid in the class was like, I also like anime. And so it's amazing that when they see their teacher do it as well, it's like, oh, okay, it's okay to open up about this.
It's not okay to be watching Madoka Magica at your age.
Well, no, I absolutely agree with that. Yes.
Do you think we like generalize anime too much? I mean, anime is like there is every kind of genres in anime. We have like we have both like realistic settings and unrealistic settings, where like most of Western cartoon is mostly unrealistic settings. In the such way, like in Cartoon Network, is always unrealistic settings, but or maybe Disney cartoon is sometimes realistic, sometimes unrealistic.
So to be fair, just like with anything, if you think about it, Star Wars is so far from realistic. Even though you want it to be real, I know you do. It's not. My company is not really building a Gundam, even though I want it to.
But you do have a Death Star.
No, we have a colony. But in truth,
let's not have a colony drop in 5 years for Gundam's 50th.
Don't.
But in truth, to outside of jest, entertainment. There's two sides of entertainment. There's one that you have to have that unrealistic nature for escapism. Some people need that escapism, which is why isekai has blown up, because people don't. Life sucks. You get born in the most violent way possible. You're pushed into the world. You're pushed to socialize with people when you necessarily don't feel comfortable socializing, or you're an extreme extrovert and you're incredibly awkward because you want to socialize, but apparently you're too much for other people. And so you're put in a situation where you're a petri dish of all these different personalities as kids going together. And then you grow up in that way. You go into college that way, and sometimes you learn to socialize better. Sometimes you learn to closet yourself and hide away from people more because of fear of anything. And you go home. How many people go home and want to watch something that is just like the shit life they have? How many people go home wanting to watch something that takes them out of reality even for an hour? That's why we have so many animes that have unrealistic settings. Now on the flip side, just like with other mediums, you are going to have animes that are slice of life. Slice of life in a way is more typically than not, very realistic to day-to-day life. Or even if it's not like perfectly realistic, you're watching someone with the same struggles you have. Or maybe if it's like Ida Zoranakis or Idakis. I love this show. It's a great, great show. Sadly, the author died before she was able to finish the series. But it's a slice of life anime. And watching it, I could relate to the character because she's so bombastic, she's so crazy. And the person she falls in love with is such an introvert, but he is kind of mean and staunchy about it.
Or it's like with me watching Working.
Well, exactly. So sometimes you watch those because you're like, all right, even though it's an anime, I'm not necessarily alone. So that's why anime has so many different things, and that's why you even seen it in like the 70s and 80s, or even in the 90s. There's so many. There's way too many series. I don't even remember all the names. But yes, there's significantly more now. I remember back in the 90s, we were lucky if we had like 5 new series. Whereas now in 2023, one season can have 90 different series.
Yeah, and about 85 to 88 of those are going to be legally streaming in the U.S.
And so there's too much out there.
But the one nice thing is though, because anime has encompassed every genre now, there's an anime for someone. Everyone can find that one series that will really resonate with them.
And that's why, like, for older anime fans, I will say for myself, I wanted to show one last thing before I finish. This is what our original handhelds look like.
Here's a PC manual for actually installing the game on your PC.
Wait, what? Oh my Jesus.
Side view, show us how to
Well, it's a strategy guide, but...
Stereo instructions.
It includes how to install.
But at the end of it all, that's why I think aging in anime is kind of fun, because we get to see how, because we were there from the beginning, or maybe not from the beginning, but we were there early on, so we get to see, luckily enough for us, how it evolved.
So whose first car had one of these in there instead of a CD player?
This is the Robotech Perfect Music Collection.
No, let me see real quick. I'm not going to take it out, but I can say that getting this tape to do anything was frightening. But hopefully you all enjoyed the panel. Maybe you learned something new. Maybe you got to, like, thank God I'm not alone being old. But at the end of it all, we are not too old to continue watching anime, nor should we stop.
Our tastes will likely change.
But we can all agree we're significantly jealous of these kids. And their easy access to every anime, thinking it's so easy to just turn on a streaming site. They do not know the war stories. And they don't believe us when we say how hard it was to get one full series of anime, because if a store was sold out, you had to wait 6 months for them to get a new copy.
Shut up, Grandma. No one wants to hear about your stupid war stories.
They don't remember the good old days of Suncoast, Sam Goody, and Media Play.
The moment of silence.
Yeah, the moment of silence for the greatest stores ever. But thank you, everyone. I had a lot of fun reminiscing with all of you about being significantly old.
Are you going to get stickers and stuff?
Yes, I have